Pam Cummings from the Abyssinian Meeting House. I am the president there, the director of education programs. When I do this particular program, I always like to make sure that everybody in the room, that we all understand what we're talking about. There's no shame if you don't. I don't assume that everybody knows what the Underground Railroad is, because I've had all kinds of different answers. I really am not concerned with the answers. My job is here to educate. So this would be a great time. You don't need to raise your hand, but I do need to let everybody know that the Underground Railroad is not about a train. And we laugh, but there are many people who don't know that. And I tell you that very, very seriously, because when I was doing research a few years back, I was trying to understand and get some information on the Underground Railroad, and I just kept getting pictures of trains. Google when you get home and look at it, all you're going to get are these steam engines and cabooses and everything, and that could be no further from the truth. The Underground Railroad is not that. So I always like to say that we have children who come into the Abyssinian Meeting House always looking for the train. You know, where are the tunnels that the train went through? Didn't happen. So we're just going to have a little bit of figuring out, where do I press to get?
You'll just be able to press the arrow button.
Okay, I'm not on my computer for those of you watching. And there we go. So the Underground Railroad, and we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are empowered by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those would be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet in a land whose very fabric is woven from the threads of freedom, 2 million of the people here and its citizens existed in slavery with absolutely no hope for anything. Yeah, let that sit there. 2 million in a country that we are supposed to be free. And the Underground Railroad started with the Fugitive Slave Act, which the Fugitive Slave Act was an act that was passed by Congress, which says that the slave catchers were employed by the slave owners. And they were able to give them descriptions of it is the person who they're looking for and the people, because the slave owners, everything that they owned was in these slave owners. So it would be like if you had, I like to make things that people can relate and understand. If you had a stock or a 401k and everything that you had was all into that investment, you're kind of watching it. You're watching it every day. And if things start to go belly up and a little haywire and crazy, you want to know what's going on. These slaves, everything for the most part that they owned, the slave owner was in these slaves. So when one escaped or one left or one was killed, one got away, that was not good for them, right? Because you think of all that they did. They helped produce their farmlands. They worked in the houses. And so if they lost one, they also didn't just lose their investment. They lost the work that came along with that investment. So the Fugitive Slave Act says that they had bounty hunters, and they could go and they could find you, a slave that had run away. And if they find you in a free state like Maine or in the North, they can find you, they can get you, and they can return you back. So you're not really free. The slave had made all of these advances to escape and to get away and to run away, and they could be in a place like Portland. But if there was a bounty hunter here, he could get you and he could bring you back, and you were no longer free and right back where you started from. And so they were paid big amounts of money. So there was a lot of motivation to find these runaway slaves. And the Underground Railroad really was the answer to that Fugitive Slave Act, because it was a system and network of secret codes and paths slaves used to escape to freedom. Today, it is one of the best examples of bravery and resistance in American history. And yet, many of us do not know how it actually functioned. How did slaves know which way to go? How did people communicate across hundreds of miles with no phones, GPSs, or internets? I'd like to tell the story. Well, today's a good one, right? I'm driving in my car and I'm thinking, where am I going? I don't know. I have the luxury of pulling up on my phone where I was going, gave me an estimated time of arrival, the directions how to get here. I know how to read. I know how to comprehend. These slaves are people who were not allowed, because slaves were not allowed to learn, they were not allowed to be taught. These people had absolutely no idea where they were going, how they were going to get there. And yet and still, they made it from the South, as far south as Georgia, Florida, to Maine, Canada, England, Europe. It baffles me and it baffles a lot of people, because really and truly this Underground Railroad was the first time that people were able to see that Black people were intelligent, that they were able to think, that they were able to comprehend, follow directions, and they still didn't know how to read. They still didn't know how to write, but they sure knew how to escape. And that was mandatory for this. So these at the same time in the United States of America, the railroad system was becoming in place here. And people were starting to use the terminologies that they used with the railroad system for the Underground Railroad. So for example, you would have, and this is how people are often confused and thinking that it is a train, because the terminologies used in the Underground Railroad are very much the same as the terminologies that are used. And I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'm going to slow it up just a little bit and let you know. This is a map of the Underground Railroad, if you will. Remember, the Underground Railroad is not the train. It's a system that was used of secret codes and songs, if you will, and different instruments that were used to help and guide people along. So what you have right here is the different arrows pointing of which you go. So if you come up to Maine and you kind of go back a little bit and you backtrack, you would see that the majority of the slaves that were coming through Maine were really from Atlanta, the South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, Delaware. And for those people, they would go west. There are two different routes that they took, right? One would be they hugged the coast of Maine up around there. And then the other is they would go off to the west. So often you have people that have sightings of we have a house. My uncle has a house. My aunt had a house. My cousin. Oh, our friends had houses, and they have basements and secret rooms in them. Is this an Underground Railroad site? No, we don't really know. Nobody knows, because I just said to you, it's a highly secretive operation, and oftentimes anything dealing with it was burned or kept secret or hidden away, because if you got caught helping these slaves at all, your family could be killed. You could be killed. Anything associated with you could be killed. And so the slaves, they could end up. So we don't have a lot of records and a lot of people are looking for a lot of answers, and a lot of answers that we can't find and we don't have, because a lot of the information was not able to be kept. Imagine if they got wind of, oh, they're going up through Portland, Maine at the Abyssinian Meeting House. They're putting together something for them. I imagine those people who are making a lot of money and their livelihood would be at the Abyssinian Meeting House, waiting across the street, up around the corner, waiting for these slaves, because that's their payday and how they got paid. But the people at the Abyssinian Meeting House did help the slaves, because the Abyssinian Meeting House, which is in Portland, and I'll tell you a little bit about, because of its location and its proximity to the water, it made it a very, working with the people there, made that a wonderful place, one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad here. But as you see the red, they tell you where they were all coming from. And the last conversation that I had, in the last talk that I did, somebody else wanted to know, well, what about all those other red arrows? You know, where are they going? You know, because the slaves didn't just go through Maine and through all of these other places. Some slaves ended up down in the islands. Some slaves ended up in Canada, which the people here in Portland, that's what they did. They worked to help them get to Canada. Because the main reason that you're doing that is once you get to Canada, you are free and free indeed. They can't find you. You can walk on the street freely because slavery was against the law there. And they were able to allow these people, and they still have a very large population today of African Americans and Black people. But it just shows you all the different routes and where they went. All the different slaves went on the different routes. And as I told you, they had a secret language in the Underground Railroad. I gave everybody, and some of you have and some of you don't, what they would use as direction songs. Has everybody got one? Because I have more if you need one. Okay. 3. Yeah. 1, 2. Make sure I have all 3 pages there. I stapled most of them and I didn't know how many we were going to need, so.
Just a few more people.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. 3 pages. And so these are what they call direction songs. And in these, because again, remember, these people could not read, they could not speak, or they could speak, but they didn't read or understand writing. So I can't write down the directions to how to get to Portland, Maine. And it's remarkable if you really sit here and you think about this. They just were able to get from there to here without being able to read or write or comprehend. They don't know who they're meeting, how they're meeting them, but what they do know is that they can sing because they brought a lot of that singing with them from Africa and the different places that they came from. So they would take in plain sight a lot of these codes and songs, and everything that they used was all spoken to them right in plain sight. They didn't try to hide it from anybody. And they were discussing their escape routes, how they would get there, who would meet them. And I brought this along so that we could probably try to figure it out for ourselves. And one of the things was follow the drinking gourd. And that was very easy for them to do because they were used to, I don't know if any of you, and I'll show you another slide, of any of you know of what a gourd looks like, what a drinking gourd looks like. Well, so it's just a ladle with a handle, which they're used to that because that's what they use in their kitchens or around where they are for water. And so they knew that, and they knew that they needed to look up in the sky because they had to go north. And just look up and look for the ladle. And you can see over there in that picture there of the ladle. I'll come right across here. If you look over here, up in the sky, there it is. And as long as you see that North Star, you know you're going the right way. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. For the old man is coming to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. So these are people that are looking for their freedom, right? And just keep following that. Your freedom is coming. Your freedom is coming. And it even gives the time of the year that they should leave. When the sun comes back and the first quail calls. Well, that's telling people quails usually do that in the beginning in April. So this person is leaving in April. This is when you're going to be leaving. And mind you now, they're talking to their slave, talking in front of everybody about their escape in this coded song, songs like this. And keep following, for there is somebody waiting to take you to freedom, right? And in there, they have in here left foot peg leg traveling on. So that right there gives them direction. When the riverbank makes a mighty good road. So whatever road that they're on, there is a river there. Follow that river, stay on that road. And in that tree, they have something that looked like a leg peg, is what they called it. So everybody's walking around and thinking that, this is common. It's an arrow, right? An arrow going wrong. But if you do what you're supposed to, you turn it down and it's an arrow pointing. Keep going. You're on the right path. Keep going. And that is in the song. You are looking for left foot peg, right? That's who you're looking for, left foot peg foot. And that's who that is. And you want to turn that around. Keep following the drinking cord. When the river ends between the two hills, keep following that drinking gourd. When great rivers meet, this is when they're going into someplace else, and a great river meets a little river, or the little river meets a bigger river. They're telling him here, there is going to be somebody waiting there to carry them to freedom. That's one of the songs, Follow the Drinking Gourd. Some of the terminologies that were used in the songs would have been the conductor. And the conductor is the person who led the slaves, right? Because they don't know who's who they're looking for. They know that a station, when you're saying these things out in the open in front of everybody, they're using these terminologies, everyday common terms and terminologies, but they were able to put this together. The safe house, the stations, the conductors, that's all those railroad terms that they were able to put together to form and make this system that I talked to you about of secret codes and secret songs and secret people and everybody coming together to form, not everybody, the abolitionists who were against slavery, who were helping them all to escape to freedom. And we all know Moses, Harriet Tubman. Moses went in and out. I'm sorry, not Moses. Harriet Tubman went in and out. 19 trips she made in total. She really did, and freed 700 people herself in those, and it's remarkable. When they talk about heaven, they're referring to Canada, again, as I told you, that freedom. And stockholders, we'll talk a little bit about stockholders, are people who donated their money, their clothes, and their food to this underground operation. Go ahead.
Did the slaveholders, abolitionists, the slaveholders, they didn't catch on?
No, they're singing. They're in their fields singing. No. Yeah, they're in their anywhere they go. They're singing. I mean, they're certainly not singing on the way to freedom because they've got to be really careful. And I'll show you another song in here where. Oh, yeah, that's the drinking gourd. So that's what it looks like. And you see how they will be able to find that in the sky, right? The constellation is the Big Dipper, which is in the sky. Find it, and then find the North Star.
Can you show me the North Star? Where is it related to the Dipper?
The North Star, I believe, is at the tip right here.
Yeah. Okay.
So you just keep following that. And as long as you're doing that, you're going north. Also, moss on the sides of trees, because that's where moss grows, on the north sides of trees. So if you saw trees, just common things that they were able to turn. And don't forget, and I always like to say about the Underground Railroad, first of all, by the time we talk about it, we're glamorizing this thing. We've glamorized it so much. And first and foremost, people who made the hardest choice were the slaves that left. Because if they got caught, boy, what they went through, the beatings, the tarring, they killed, their families killed, whatever, they went back. I mean, at some point, they just decided it was well worth the risk to leave. But they did the hard job. They left. And we like to glamorize this and make it think that this was an opportunity that was created necessarily by white people for the freeing of Black slaves. But I really want to say that first and foremost, it really is the slaves who are the hero. But that being said, you cannot separate the two. because it is the Black and the white people working together. There are a lot of lessons that we could take from that today, because these are people that were helping people get to and from who couldn't read and who couldn't write. We have everything in our hands today that we could use, and we still can't get along. So it's incredible what happens when you have like minds. You don't need to be the same color. You don't need to have the same religion. You don't need to have a lot of the same thoughts. You do have to have one belief, and that is that they were against slavery and fighting against it. And those who were against it, they worked together. They just worked tirelessly to end the evils of slavery and to bring these people into freedom. Again, I showed you that picture of the drinking gourd in the sky. That one's a little bit more so that you can see it at night. Imagine if they're just out in the river. They just got to keep following that North Star. Wade in the Water, second song that we have there. Wade in the water. So the codes in here are, if you were being chased by dogs, because these people had dogs that they were picking up the scent of these runaway slaves with. But what they would do is wade in the water, get into the water. If dogs were on your track, get in your tracks, get in the water, because the dogs cannot pick up your scent in the water. So if you wade in the water and just wade in the water, God's going to trouble the water. Something's going to happen. Somebody could throw a rock in there. Somebody, could do anything. When Harriet Tubman did it, she would throw rocks in the water, make bird sounds, anything to distract, and let the people know. So they're just sit in that water, and God's going to just keep on troubling the water. And the band all dressed in red, God's going to trouble. And look over yonder, what do you see? God's trouble in the water, so that you can just follow down that Jordan stream, which I showed you in the previous slide before. Freedom again. That's your freedom. Oops. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. This was one of Harriet Tubman's favorite songs. Oh, I keep hitting that by mistake. And Swing Low. Back to that map that we were looking at. Swing low. Swing chair. Go low. Go in the lower states to bring them up when you go. These are also codes for people to know. The chariot, it's coming for to carry you home. You're going to go see your family. You're going to see your friends who escaped before you. If you just sang the song, your directions are all in there. It's coming for to carry you home. And home again is with your family and your friends. I don't want to belabor that point too much, you guys, but that's just one of the ways that they help them to get around. They had codes here. If you came, they would have certain knocks that they used on doors. Couple, come on in or don't. They knew this would be the abolitionists, not the slaves, because the slaves are at everybody's mercy. What happened is they had groups of people that organized and became stakeholders in the Underground Railroad. They supported it. They provided the food, clothing, shelter for the runaway slaves. And they would put them from station home. Remember, I told you the word station meant from house to house. The conductor who was leading them would bring them to whatever the home was that they would go. They would stay and wait, feed them for a couple of days or however long it took for them to be able to get. Some people had to sit and wait a little bit longer because word was, as they say, word on the street was, this person had escaped, right? And they were looking for him.
I remember reading, I think it was a children's book about quilts that gave directions. People would hang quilts over their railings.
Yeah.
That would give directions.
So the only problem I have with that, and it's not a problem, it really isn't. I used to do a workshop. I still do a workshop. What I don't do in my workshop is tell you that is fact. Now, they do have all of these quilts that were made by people because quilting was something that they did in Africa and they brought here. They do certainly have those quilts. They certainly do have codes on them. They certainly do have direction, but it cannot be proven that that is a fact, that they in fact used those as codes for the Underground Railroad. So based on that, I'm not comfortable sharing that. Now, I had a critic with me the last time I did this, which I shouldn't have brought them, but I did. And they had a real problem with that answer, you know, but what you're not going to be able to do is say, she gave us some information that's false or misleading. I'm not doing that. So I feel much better about myself, about my presentation, about the information that I'm giving to you by telling you right up front, I'm not comfortable giving you that because it's not verifiable information. And there have been books written about that's not true. So you can do your own research and figure it out. They're beautiful quilts. Boy, it sounds good. And they have a lot of different types of patterns and everything telling that this is how they led the people. But some of the theories where they hung them over their porch they're in the woods. You ever been in your car in Mississippi or in Carolinas and driving down those roads where the swamps are? There are no porches anywhere. I don't think they were anywhere near. So I'm not comfortable, but they do exist. And I do a workshop on them, but not with this. And so how this becomes local is to the Abyssinian Meeting House. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Abyssinian here, but it's in Portland, Maine, and it was established in 1828 by 6 Black men, free Black men, who were worshiping at the First Parish Church in Portland. And when they went to church there, they would not let them sit in the pews. They were relegated to the balconies and the corners in the buildings. And at that time, again, 1828, Black churches were starting to spring up, and they were forming their own churches, and they became social and political hubs. And so some of the people that were involved in the Abyssinian knew of that, and they knew the plans and how the churches looked and everything. And they petitioned the First Parish Church, and asked if they'd be allowed to have their own church. They did not feel welcome there. They wanted to be able to come in and worship. And when people from out of town came, they weren't allowed to worship there either. And so they fought hard. And I like to tell, I do a lot of workshops with little children. They didn't pick up guns, believe it or not. They picked up pens. That's how they got this done. They used their voice and pens and separated themselves from that church. And they began what they call the Abyssinian Church, which was located on Newbury Street in Portland.
Where does the term Abyssinian come from?
It's Black. It means Black, and they brought it, a lot of them use it. But can I just tell you something? I really, every single time, that's the number one question, and I wish I had a prettier answer. But that's it. They
meaning the African language, or
it just means Black. Yeah. And they used it. They use that term. Like there's an Abyssinian church in New York. There are a lot of things Abyssinian associated of and around Black places. So it means Black. But everybody does ask that question. So thank you. But they created this, and the men in that, when they petitioned the church, they set it up themselves. They became a part of the Underground Railroad. That's where the tie comes. The members there then became stockholders. Remember, I told you that stockholders in the railroad were people that provided money, food, clothing, and shelter for the runaway slaves. These people got together and worked with William Lloyd Garrison, who was an abolitionist, one of the major abolitionists. He came to speak to Portland, to the Quakers in Portland against the evils of slavery. And it's across from the courthouse in Portland where the church used to be, or their meeting house used to be. And he came in there one night, and Reuben Ruby, who was the person who gave the people at the Abyssinian the money to support their efforts for this church, he owned his own hack business, which a hack was like a modern day Uber, right? It just coming to get you and the horse and buggy. And he took him around. That was a job of influence. It gave him a lot of connections that he was able to meet. And when William Lloyd Garrison came to town, he was also working with Frederick Douglass in the other states, in the United States. And he told Reuben Ruby what was going on. So he was at the church with the Quakers that first night, and then the members of the Abyssinian invited him to come in the second night and talk to them about what was going on. The funny thing is he was chased out of the Quakers' house, and the women are the people that had to usher him out. And he then he was a big supporter of women and them using their voices and helping them so much that they called them the Garrisonians after him, Garrison. Yeah, so they started this, and so what they did was they decided to become stakeholders in the Underground Railroad, which helped slaves escaping, making it from the south to the north. Again, Portland and its proximity to the water. And what happened is a lot of the men that were members of this were able to work in the shipyards, or where the ships, the boats were, not really ships back then, but where all the boats, the steamships and boats are. That's where they were able to work. They had access to all of the schedules because they worked there. So when there was a slave was coming in, they would know, because as you know, the codes of secrets and everything that went on, he knew that somebody was coming. He would then make Reuben Ruby aware, somebody's coming. We need you to come and help. And Reuben Ruby would sit and he'd wait at the docks, and that slave would come and not, when I was getting ready to say, he disembarked, and that's such a pretty word for what happened, because you got to remember, everybody's watching out for these runaway slaves. So you got to kind of do it in secret. But they get him to Reuben Ruby, who's waiting for them at the edge of the dock. And if you ever get a chance to go into Portland, you should really do that. That's kind of the walk that I do, a walk back in time, which you walk from there all the way back up to the Abyssinian, all the way. It's only a couple streets up, but you understand the proximity to the water. But he would pick them up and he would whisk them off. And they would go to a barber shop. And so the person that owned the barbershop was a member of the Abyssinian. He would close down his shop. Oftentimes these slaves traveled in the guise of night. So this person would close down his shop after midnight and when it's dark, and they would come in the back. And so if somebody came with a beard, they would take the beard away, or somebody needed a beard, they would change the way that they looked, because don't forget, they have an accurate description of who you are, and you've got to try to change what you look like. This was one of the ways that they did it. And after that, or before that, one of the other stops would be to the secondhand clothing store. And people often ask, why? They're not looking for a wardrobe. They sometimes need to have different clothes to change in, because they're coming from the south to the north. Now, imagine if they came last Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever we had that snowstorm in the middle of April, right? And I was in New York last week, and it was really nice. So conceivably, I would have thought I could have just wore a little shirt and something and made it here. But little did I know, back here it was snowing a lot. So they had to sometimes change their clothes, because they didn't have clothes for the winter months. When they got there, the clothes that the slaves had, the slave owners gave to them, and they didn't have a lot. They had one, at most two different outfits that they had. That is also how the slave owners were able to know exactly what that person looked like, because he gave them the clothes, or they gave them the clothes. So they changed their clothes for them, or they would get a change in clothing so that they could then come and endure the elements here or wherever they were. So they would take them to the person's house. Again, they would then wait. They would wait until they got the call, or not the call, the code, or they would meet together. Okay, tonight it's going to happen. If they come by and there's a candle in the window, okay, keep moving. If the candle's out, come on in, or when they came in, the knocking on the door that they had to do. That again, those were some of the codes that were secretive, right? And a lot of people, as I said to you, a lot of people are looking for this information. They want this information so desperately. And why can't we get it? We're done. This was so secretive that you just really don't know. You really don't. And this person that I was telling you is my critic was in the audience, and one of the questions was, how many slaves were freed using this Underground Railroad? Well, again, I'm not comfortable. I can give you an estimate, and that's all I would ever give to you, because nobody knows exactly how many lives were or are affected. Harriet Tubman might be somebody who's a little bit different, because that's what she did. We can say that she freed 700 people because those are the trips that she made. That we can justify. I can't give you a number for how many slaves were freed. What I did tell you in the beginning, though, is there were 200 million people living in slavery in the United States.
So, Gary's question for me, how much, if any, of this information is actually documented? Was any of it written down, or is it, where do you read?
So what you have are Black families who have these histories, right? And so we're having issues with trust too. I mean, we're the Abyssinian Meeting House, right? We have the artifact. This building really is the artifact of Maine Black history, right? We can go in there. We can tell you by our nails. We can tell you by the wood, the window. We can tell you when this building was here and the digs we've done and what these people probably did living here. This is the artifact of Maine Black history. And some of these people won't even give us the information. So, I mean, the Historic Society, Maine Historic Society, has done a real good job cataloging this. But no, we don't know, because people lost families. The people that were helping these slaves, it wasn't just the slaves that were in danger, but the people helping them were in danger as well.
What was the relationship of things from the local police or the local institutions with the Underground Railroad? And then these bounty hunters. I mean, did the police help them find?
So if you look up the Fugitive Slave Act, it was a law, right? It was a law in place. Yes. Well, so first and foremost, they were all people that were connected together they knew who they were, right? They were the same people that were using their same homes. They were feeding them, they were just a group of people working together against the evils of slavery, right? The stockholders, the Quakers, the Black people, the white people, everybody in there. Their goal was, they had a couple of goals. Their goal was to get these slaves from where they were coming to North or England, Europe, or to get them, the ones that were there to go further down, freedom. Because if you got caught here in Portland, you were a bounty hunter. That's what they did for a living. That's what they got paid. That's how they put food on their family's table. And they were paid mightily for the job that they did. So they weren't all working together in kumbaya moments. They had secrets that they kept amongst the people that were working together to end this. And so, again, the members of the Abyssinian Meeting House, I put this picture up here because it was those members there that worked with the members of the Underground Railroad. I mentioned Reuben Ruby. He became really, he was able to vote. Black men were able to finally vote. And boy, he made his way right there the next day and he started voting and he never stopped, right? He just kept going, the changes that he made. And I often think, people like to think that a lot of these civil rights movements happened in the 1960s. I believe this Abyssinian Meeting House right here was one of the first civil rights acts, because these were people in the church who said, you are no longer going to treat us this way. We are no longer sitting here. We are people. We deserve the right to openly worship our God, your God, right? And so they created these. I think that was the first civil rights moments. And I believe that the civil rights that were realized in the 1960s were out of the efforts made by people that were doing this.
Is the Abyssinian House in other cities too?
No. So this Abyssinian Meeting House, number one, there are only 2 sites in the state of Maine that are officially recognized by the National Park Service as an official Underground Railroad site. So I told you all these, we got a lot of myths, a lot of stories about people who have houses, and you may, I don't know. This, we had to undergo a tremendous amount of scrutiny and paperwork to become official. We are one, and Harry Beecher Stowe House is the second. And she, the room that she wrote, the book that she wrote in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Yeah, I didn't know. So that's why that is included. But there are only 2 sites, and we did go through an awful lot to be recognized. And the Abyssinian Meeting House is one of only 3 in the country, and that's the oldest active African American meeting house.
Was her house also in the Underground Railroad? Was she also nothing to do with the railroad?
No, she was inspired by a gentleman who they say was from the from the Abyssinian Meeting House. Everything again, they say. But she felt compassion. She was one of those people who was touched by the stories and by the evils of slavery. And so that's why she's on there, because she's an official. I don't know, they made her one. And from what I understand, that room is closed now, but she was a woman that I know was in there. She was leading it, and they've closed it. But also at the Abyssinian Meeting House, they educated. There was a school there. There's only 1 of 5 in the entire country that was paid for by taxpayers in the city of Portland. And the reason that it shut down isn't what many people would think, but the people in Portland said, we're tired of paying taxes for these children to go to a different school. They all need to go to the same school. And they put them into the Portland public schools. Portland was ahead of its time back in 1850.
Do you know when that happened? When it integrated?
I want to tell you, you know what, I want to say 1840, 18. So I'll tell you another funny story is my dad comes with me a lot. He's 90 now, or he'll be 90 in September, but he's still got those dates locked in tight up there. My mother won't let him come anymore because she tells him he's too old. I don't know why she does that, but anyway, but he usually sits there, and that question always comes out, and he's always there. I can usually look at him, and he says 1860 or whatever. So I got him in there, but I have so many others in there. So, but he definitely has them all.
Where is the Harriet Beecher Stowe House?
It's by Bowdoin, Bowdoin College. Yeah. And the Abyssinian Meeting House, we're restoring it now back to its original site. And as I said, the Anti-Slavery Society was founded by the members there. They were really globally aware people. They weren't just worried about what was going on in the city of Portland, Maine. They were involved in all of the acts of slavery around the country and parts of the world, in Europe. And they would send delegates out to these conventions. And the ministers that we got at the Abyssinian meetings, they were educated Black men, because there was a college in New York who would educate them. And there was a group of 5 of them who would have a circuit. So they would start out here and then end up in Connecticut, New York, Philadelphia, that whole circle. And they all would just keep coming in and out. And Amos Freeman was the man who believed in education. And a lot of the members at the Abyssinian Meeting House believed that, you are to get educated, you're to get your education, you're to present yourself in front of white people, if you will, in a way that they won't be disgusted, in a way that they would want to help you, in a way that they would see you're trying and you're making your way. So that's why the schoolhouse became really important for these Black students, because the city of Portland didn't want these Black students at first, until, you know, way before they integrated, when they began this. They didn't want them because they said a lot of them were lazy, a lot of them were stupid, a lot of them were derelicts. And it reminds me of sort of like the Statue of Liberty. Give me your stupid, give me your lazy, give me your tired, give me, and I'll make a difference. And that's what he did. He wanted to bring them in to teach them, educate them. A lot of his education that he wanted to do was so that they could all go back to Africa as educated people, but they ended up staying here. But he also had music lessons there for these students. So yeah, a big deal. This little building is a very big deal. And we've been restoring it now. My sister is the founder of the Abyssinian Meeting House. There was an article in the paper about this building that was dilapidated, and it looks gorgeous there, because when we first got it, it was horrendous. And we've done a lot of work. It's taken them a long time. I haven't been doing this. My sister started this 30 years ago. Yeah, her daughter was 3 years old, going to meetings with her. Her daughter has since graduated from Wayne Fleet Brown, has her master's in something public health, and just moved to DC. That's how long it's been. She's 33 years old, I believe. And so she used to go around with my sister, and my sister worked hard to establish the nonprofit organization, because this building needs to be remembered. The things that went on in that building need to be remembered, because they fought. The women fought the good fight. The men fought the good fight. They all fought really, really hard for the lives of not just the slaveries, but to make lives better for the Black people freed and the ones that were not free. And so it's so important that we are on the national landscape, and we have just been given $1.7 million to complete this building. Yeah, they realize it's a very important, it really, really is. So they realize this is very important information for you, for the students. I told you I bring a lot of students in there, and it's amazing the younger Black children that come in here, because the field trips that they take have always been to, you know, the Victoria Mansion or the Historic Society or Longfellow's house, and they finally come in and learn their history. And I got to tell you, they leave so much lighter, and I don't mean in complexion wise. They leave so much lighter. You know, they want to hug me. They want to, can I bring my mother? Can I bring my sister? Because they finally have something that's theirs. And so that makes them more productive, right? Yeah. And this, as I tell everybody, this isn't just a local story, right? We're just this little building in Portland, Little Portland, Maine. But Little Portland, Maine is a part of the United States of America, and we're part of a big world. And everybody wants this information. Everybody wants to know, how did this happen? How did they do that? And I hope I've answered your questions for you. I hope I have.
Someone on Zoom would like to know if the Abyssinian House is open to the public during the reconstruction.
Okay, so yes, we do allow you. We'll give you a tour. We're really getting we can't do it too much anymore, because we are really getting ready to ramp up the restoration. We got that 1.7 million about a year and a half ago, but the red tape is unbelievable. So
we can share that with you. We have the same grant.
Yeah. You do? Oh, good. Because my sister yesterday just had the question, does everybody else have to do this? So I can tell her, yes, they do. Great.
I was just wondering, how can we help,
just keep helping, give, give. And everybody, we have money, and the city came out mightily. Not just the city, the state, the United States of America, because we didn't get money from just people in Portland, Maine. We got money from people in California, Florida, Mexico, all over who wanted to help us with that. When Black Lives Matters, and they were sitting at the city hall, and they were ranting, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And we're like, hey, if Black Lives Matter, this building is a shambles. They started it all. Let's give, let's get this going. And Everybody responded mightily. We got a lot of money, and it's still going to take a lot of money. And unfortunately, when we have an article, I get to read the editorials, and then along with that come the comments. And everybody, you know, what are they doing with 1.7? They must have gold toilets. It's a restoration. I promise you, not one of us is getting paid. So it's not going to salaries. It's going to the building. It's going to the architects. It's going to the engineers. It's going to the building people. We see nothing. We're doing it because we just love what we do.
Do you have any favorite books that you recommend, either fiction or nonfiction that tells the story on railroad? The way that you...
No, because I think they're all good. I really do. I think there's a writer here from Maine, and I just can't think of it right now. If you give me your email, I'll give it to you. They tell a story about a slave. So yeah.
There is a book that I really enjoy called Master, Slave, Husband, Wife.
Mm.
And it's a story, it's a true story of a couple who weren't allowed to get married.
Mm-hmm.
They escaped, and it tells the story of their escape. She was very light-skinned.
Mm-hmm.
So she posed as a man.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And her husband took on the persona of being her slave.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able actually to get to the north. But it was a fascinating story because one of the things I learned was that, for instance, free blacks were still hounded.
Yeah.
They could be sent back, even though they had the paper that showed they were free black, they could still go back to their slave owner.
Yeah, so depending upon how they got here and when they got here, that is very true.
Yeah. And the other thing is that whole circuit of speeches, Boston, places in Connecticut, it was a real circuit.
Yeah, it really is.
Travel around and tell their story. Yeah. And people came and people listened. It's fascinating.
That is how the whole momentum, if you will, kept going. Yeah. And these, as I told you, these were globally minded, educated men. And they knew what they were doing, and they did it well.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the community in China, Maine, where the man, and I can't remember his name, but he brought slaves from down south with an agreement that they would build his farm, and once they did, in payment, he gave them their freedom. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not. I thought you meant there's a Talbot family there. My uncle is a Talbot. My cousin is Rachel Talbot. She's the House of Representative, Speaker of the House. And she is the one who's put forth the bill for the legislation of making it mandatory that all students learn about African-American history, because it's all history. Right? It's all inclusive. It's about including everything so that everybody has a better understanding of who we are, so we know where we're going, right? So we don't end up kind of like we are today, maybe, but.
Maybe do one more question. Is there an online question? No. Okay.
Go ahead. You guys, I'm so sorry.
Coming for today. I just had two. One was if the bounty hunters were paid well, but it was private money. Were there any publicly funded bounty hunters that were like that the taxpayers were paying?
No.
Okay, great. And then
we'll come back. Are we done?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for the rocky start.
Well, thank you so much. It was really wonderful to learn more about our history, and don't forget to do the survey on the way out. Thank you so much for being here.